Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. If success doesn't feel like it should, today we'll find out why from our guest, Laura Gassner Otting. Laura, thanks for being with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Bill.
Laura, you've written a book, and it has, to me, the most unusual title we've ever had on, Wonderhell, like two words, wonder and hell. Tell me, what does that mean?
So, when we are striving and pushing and trying to succeed, we sometimes get there. Sometimes we have a huge amount of success. Sometimes we have a small amount of success, but any amount of success feels exciting. It feels humbling. It feels amazing. It feels wonderful. But what I've learned is that as we achieve some level of success, in the achievement of it, we see a version of ourselves that we didn't quite realize was there. And in that version of ourselves, we get increased hunger. We have a faster pace. There's bigger goals. And within that, we feel anxiety and uncertainty and doubt and imposter syndrome and stress. So it's kind of wonderful, but sometimes it's also kind of hell. Success can kind of be Wonderhell.
Very good. So you're telling us what to expect. This isn't a manual about how to be successful. It's more what to expect along the way. Is that it?
Exactly right. I spent 20 years in executive search, and I was always fascinated by the fact that I was hired by my clients to call the most successful people in the world. But despite all that success, which is why I was calling them, they weren't very happy, which is why they were all calling me back. And it was because each one of these people, when I called them up and dangled the possibility of a different, bigger job in front of their imagination, they went, "Oh, well, that's interesting." And suddenly they imagined themselves in this other role. And once they saw that new them, they couldn't unsee it. So I became very interested in that space in your psyche where the burden of your potential walks in and goes, "Hey there, what you got for me? What are you going to do with this newfound you that you just saw that you didn't even know existed last week, last month, or last year?" And when I found myself in that place, I decided to figure out a way out of it. And so I talked to 100 different glass ceiling shatters, Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, all in a way to just get out. And what I learned is that there's no way to get out of Wonderhell. You just have to get comfortable being in Wonderhell. Because on the other side of this success is just the next one, and the next one, if we're lucky, the next one after that.
Now, this almost seems like I'm hearing the wrong thing. You're talking about successful people who said they weren't really happy. Am I correct? Did I hear you correctly?
That is correct, because we are told all you need to do is achieve success. And once you get there, it's easy money. Everything's going to be great. But anyone who's ever achieved something knows that once you achieve something, there's even more out there. And, as we try to climb the ladder, as we, increase the gravity of our goals, we learn that every new level brings a new devil. Like there's always going to be that doubt and uncertainty and imposter syndrome. There's burnout, there's envy, there's exhaustion, there's all of these things that we have. And we're told that that's just part and parcel. Like those are necessary evils of getting everything we've ever wanted. But the truth is that it's not. We don't have to be in that space where we see only the hell. I wanted to write a book that helped people understand the wonder as well.
And I just wrote that down, that expression, every new level brings a new devil. I think that's a very good one. And perhaps that might be the title of your next book. Maybe we shouldn't use it too much and steal it on you.
This would be a good subtitle.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Now, you talk about success being like an amusement park. Can you explain why?
So in my first book, I wrote about how we are all handed definitions of success that are given to us by somebody else. So when we pursue it and we get there, we're like, is this all there is? Is this all I was meant for? That was an easier book to write because we all want to have the shared goal. Success, we want success to feel good, but it doesn't because we're pursuing someone else's definition. You can't be insatiably hungry for someone else's goals. So how do we figure out our own? Here's a rubric to do that based on the 20 years of experience I had. And here's how to change yourself, your workplace, or your career in order to get there. Easy, totally a linear path. However, each of us, as we're experiencing success, once we're going after something that matters to us, right, and the stakes are higher, we're going to have different emotions. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, it's kind of like an amusement park where you go into an amusement park and you might want to go to Small World first, or you might want to go to the roller coaster first, or maybe you want to go to the snack bar first. Everybody goes in a different order. And so she said, it would be cool if you talked about all the emotions that we feel when we're in Wonderhell, and you had this sort of map, and it was like, you are here. So for some of us, you're going to start in Imposter Town. For some of us, you're right in Doubtsville. And for others of us, you are smack in Burnout City. And then in each one of these 3 towns, there are 5 rides, each of which are supposed to emulate one of the emotions that we might have in these moments. So it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure book, where if you're feeling like, wow, I've succeeded, I've done something I didn't know I could do, but it feels like I'm not in control. Maybe you're in the roller coaster. If you're like, oh God, I've succeeded, but I want to slow down, maybe you want to go on the merry-go-round, right? So each of the chapters is a ride, and each ride has stories from people who have been through it and some of the things that I learned in my interviews with them.
Now, of the people you've come across, I'm sure this is going to be very interesting. Have you seen someone, after talking to you and reading parts or your entire book, said, I realized I'm a bright person, I'm a successful person, but rather than being a success in this field, I want to move over to teaching or religion or a not-for-profit or something that we just really wouldn't expect? Was there one that was really totally the opposite of what you would have thought?
Well, in this book, I talked to people who tried to figure out how to manage Wonderhell and what they were doing. But in the Burnout City section of the book, there are definitely some stories of people who were like, I was in this career and it wasn't right for me. And I realized, for example, Jordan Harbinger, who has a very successful podcast, said to me, I've got small kids and I realized that kids spell love Time. And they're not going to be around for that long. They're not going to want to hang out with me for that long until they're like, you old fart, I don't want to hang out with you, Dad. I want to take care of it now. So he decided to not, keep growing and not push the podcast. Another woman was in the same spot where she was starting to feel burnout, and she was in a really big legal job when one of her kids came down with cancer. He's fine now, but in doing the research of this, she realized that what she really wanted to be doing was making an impact by creating what is now a national children's cancer research nonprofit. In my last book, though, Limitless, that entire book is dedicated to people who have decided to completely change their path from going from one thing to another because they realized what was missing in their work, whether it was purpose, whether it was happiness, whether it was, contribution, whether it was money, whatever it might be. So Limitless, my last book, has a little bit more like left turns and right turns and U-turns. But I will say this. Having spent 20 years in executive search, I can tell you that the most interesting people, in fact, let me rephrase that, the only interesting people who I talked to, and I interviewed thousands of people, were the ones who took these left turns and right turns and U-turns.
And I just want to emphasize something, because you said it very quickly there, in your field of executive search. So you are dealing with these people literally on a day-to-day basis. Executives, the high-powered people, the really aggressive, the people who went to the best schools, took all the courses, did what you have to do, gave up either part of their home life or family life or years of their life for college studies experience. And some of them are still dissatisfied.
Most of them are. I mean, it was my job to call the most successful people and recruit them away to go work for an organization that they may not know, for a boss that they definitely didn't know, with a headhunter who they certainly didn't know, right? It sounds like kind of a hard job. I had to pursue bold-faced people doing bold-faced things in bold-faced companies. And they all called me back. So why do you think that is, right? Like everybody, we have evolved for millennia to want to be pursuing and growing and changing. And we are fed by the, hustle porn success culture that it should be like bigger, better, faster, more all the time. And what I learned is that bigger, better, faster, more doesn't actually mean anything to you if it doesn't mean anything to you. Like in order for your work to mean something to you, it has to mean something for you. And for most people, they were handed a definition of success decades ago. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a boss, maybe it was an internet celebrity, right? Like no matter who it was, there was somebody who was the role model of success. And at 15, 16, 17 years old, somebody said to us, pick a major, pick a college, pick a path, pick a trade, right? Pick a job. And we went, okay. But you know what you don't have when you're 15, 16, 17 years old? Like, what don't you have?
You don't have the world experience. You haven't been out there. You haven't done it yet. And you probably don't really know what you like.
And you know what else you don't have? A frontal lobe, like the actual part of your brain that dictates good, common, like logical decision making isn't even there. So you don't have life experience. You don't have common sense. You don't have perspective. And you literally do not have the capacity to make a good decision when we're asked to make a decision that's going to affect the very rest of our lives. So it's no surprise that we wake up at 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, and we're like, is this all there is? Like, is this all I was meant for? So there's a couple of things that are going on that we're pursuing somebody else's definition of success. And we're told by a lot of those people what our ceiling should be. The issue is sometimes when we then start to achieve success, we realize that that other person's ceiling is really our floor, right? And there's more in us. And we're trying to figure out, can I go for it? Should I go for it? Are these people going to like me? Will they approve? What if I fail and they point at me and they look at me? And is this even meant for me? And so that space of Wonderhell is all these jumbled emotions that we're trying to manage in these moments when we're realizing that there's more inside of us and we actually really want to go for it.
Laura, there's so many more questions we want to ask, but at this point in the show, we want to take a brief break and let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Laura Gassner Otting. Her book is Wonderhell, WONDERHELL, just the way it sounds. And Laura, can you tell us, is there a website where we can find out more information?
Sure. So the book is at wonderhell.com, and you can find me at lauragassnerotting.com.
And as you've already heard, Laura's in this profession. She meets these successful people who are unhappy or looking to move jobs or looking for something else in life. So before you make a mistake, you may want to pick up a copy and learn from Laura and some of her clients. Now, Laura, you mentioned in the book that I guess to be successful, we must kind of agree to play in an uncomfortable playground. And we're always told that, get out of your comfort zone. But how do we know if our comfort zone is because we're just not happy or if it's just part of graduating and moving up the steps to that successful office up the hall?
You know, there's really no way to know until you start going, right? So, you know, there's an interesting study that I cite in the book by Stephen D. Levitt, which is one of the guys from Freakonomics. And he said that people who flip a coin when they're trying to make a big decision, you know, leave the job, buy the house, get married, whatever the thing is, years later, they report that they are happier having made the decision to go forward. They flip a coin and the coin says heads, go. Those people are happier than the people who flip a coin and the coin says tails, don't go, don't do it. Even if they say in hindsight, it was the wrong decision, they still say that they're happier having made the decision and done it, because action beats stagnation every single day. We don't know why we're pursuing the thing we're pursuing until we get there. And then we ask ourselves how we feel about it. Not how our mom feels about it, not how our friends feel about it, not how, you know, some person who follows on the internet thinks about it, but how we actually feel about it. So we have to start moving forward, because it's in the making the mistakes and falling down and picking ourselves up that we figure out what we actually care about and where we want to go. Look, everybody says, follow your passion. Like, I think that's nonsense. I think that's actually terrible advice, because all that says is all you have to do is follow your passion and everything's going to be amazing. And that says that the first time you get handed a rejection or a no, or you fail, oh, this must not be my passion, I guess I should do something else. Well, that's wrong. People say, like, tell me what you do if you knew you couldn't fail. That's your passion. I'm like, no, tell me what you would do if you knew for sure you would fail, but you'd pick yourself up over and over and over and over, because doesn't your passion deserve that? The only way that we're going to know is if we just start moving forward.
You're giving us some really thought-provoking questions, and we're going to have to dig deep for some of these answers. Now, I saw in your book, there's a place, or a fictional place in the book, called Imposter Town.
Yes.
Can you tell us why there's such a fictional place and what it has to do with our careers?
So when my last book launched, it launched at #2 on the Washington Post bestseller list, right behind Michelle Obama. And I was like, that's so cool. I thought 3 people would buy it, like my mother, my father, my husband, maybe my mom would buy it used from my dad. And then it was #2. And the first thought I had, because I was so exhausted from the book launch, the place in my brain that normally governs my humility had disappeared. The first thought I had, Bill, was, I wonder how you get to be #1, right? And suddenly I was like, oh, I think I want that. I want more. And immediately the next thought was, oh, I can't do that. That's not for me. That's for famous people. That's for big thinkers, right? Immediately I had imposter syndrome. How can I do it? Who am I to want this? Who am I to think about this? And in my career in executive search, I noticed the same thing. There were a lot of people who I would call to ask them what they thought about this new, bigger job. And a lot of their reactions were, well, I've got 9 out of 10 of the things on the requirements, but I don't have all of them. Maybe I shouldn't apply. Well, no candidates are perfect, but of course, our first instinct is always, maybe I shouldn't, maybe not me. And so 70% of people actually experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. And one of the things I thought was most striking in the interviews that I did of these 100, Olympic medalists and glass ceiling shatterers and startup unicorns is that almost every single one of them at every age and at every stage, I mean, literally people who were starting their second billion-dollar company had imposter syndrome. Olympic athletes who were at the top of the ski slope with a gold medal from the previous slope in their pocket had imposter syndrome. We all have it. And so I thought that's a pretty good place to start the book.
Not only a pretty good place, but I think you've made us all feel a lot better that maybe that fear we have that we can't do that next task, whatever it is, teach 3rd grade because we've taught 2nd grade and we don't know those big children in 3rd grade, or go from high school to college, or whatever the level change might be. You've made us feel pretty good about it. Now, when you did your executive searches, did you have to convince people of this to break out of that imposter town and realize, they either had degrees or experience or qualities that made them perfect for the next job?
Always, always. And the way that I would do it is I'd be a little sneaky. So I wouldn't call somebody and say, hey, Bill, I'm doing a search for the CEO of this organization and here's what they do. And what do you think? Are you interested? No, I didn't do that because somebody would say, well, no, probably not me. I'm not so sure. Right. So I would stop and I would say, hey, Bill, I'm doing a search for this organization. Here's what they're looking for. Here's where they're going. Who do you know who's really smart in this area? This is the kind of thing that they're thinking about. Who do you know who cares a lot about this kind of impact? These are the sorts of things that they're doing. Who do you know who's interested in this sort of culture? This is what it feels like to work there. So I would get you all interested and you would tell me about all the different people that you know. And at the end, I'd be like, well, this seems like kind of a crazy question, but I'd love to talk to you about this. I've been looking at your profile and I've been reading, your LinkedIn, and boy, it sure seems like you're excited about the culture and their impact and what they're up to. And, I'm not asking you to apply, but why don't we just have a conversation about what it might look like if you were in this organization? And then suddenly I would get into your brain and into your imagination, and you would start seeing yourself there. And I will tell you that internal candidates always leave if they don't get the job. And it's because the very act of interviewing for the position means that they literally have to wear the clothes of that role, speak in the voice of that role, think in the mindset of that role. And then you've got them. You're in their imagination and they can't unsee themselves in that role. So in my search work, rather than trying to convince somebody that they were good enough, I would just get into their imagination and let them imagine it themselves.
This seems like a new reality show because you almost seem like a true crime. The detective who talks to the person before they know it, the person is admitting everything and saying, wait, I didn't want to admit that. And you just talked me through it. And I just told you I committed 5 murders and told you where all the bodies are. And is the gun I use. So
I'm pretty sneaky. You got to be pretty sneaky because, most people, and especially anybody who isn't like a straight cisgendered white dude who went to Harvard is going to feel like, well, there's somebody who's better. There's somebody like, I don't fit the mold. I don't look like traditional leadership. When I first started speaking, I had a conversation with a woman named Allison Levine, and Allison captained the first all-women's expedition, all women's American all-women's expedition up Everest, right? So captain this incredible climb. She was incredibly successful. And then she went to go speak to speaking bureaus. And when I talked to her, she was like, Laura, you should be rep by speaking bureaus. And I was like, no, I didn't climb Everest. And she's like, well, when I went to go talk to speaking bureaus, they were like, yeah, so you captained the first all women's American expedition up Everest, but did you saw off your arm in order to get home safe? Because we've already got that guy, right? There's always going to be somebody who's got a better resume or a different story or more skills. But the truth is, and I hope everybody who is listening hears me when I say this, there are no perfect candidates. And the only way to get into that position, to get the experience that you're missing, is to get the job based on the stuff that you do have. Like what you've done, so far won't get you to, like, what got you to here won't get you to there. But what got you to here is a foundation of knowledge and experience and network and curiosity that will actually get you to there. So don't hold back, even if you don't think you're perfect.
Laura, I'm laughing because I think every parent is going to make their child or children read your book now after hearing this show. But before we go further, I want to let our audience know, if you're just tuning in, you're wondering who this wonderful person is, I'm going to tell you. Our guest today is Laura Gassner, spelled Gassner, Otting, Otting. Her book is Wonderhell, and you're listening to the interview on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And of course, I'm Bill Horan. Laura, also, I want our audience to know that if you're finding this as fascinating as I am, and if you didn't hear the entire show or you want someone else to listen to it, you can go to nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Just look for Secrets of Success as a podcast and look for the book Wonderhell. I think anybody who doesn't feel they could qualify for a job after listening to Laura, they're going to go out there and knock them dead and take that shot and see where it leads. And maybe 5 years from now, when they're CEO, they'll give Laura the credit because of her book, Wonderhell. Laura, you say in the book that it's not a problem of achieving success. It's how we define it. What do we do that's wrong in defining success?
Well, I talked earlier about how we're handed this definition by somebody in our path. I mean, when I was in fourth grade, my teacher told me that I was a really argumentative young woman and that I'd make a great lawyer. The first thing I told her, of course, is that she was wrong because, I'm argumentative.
Exactly.
Argumentative. But then I proceeded to create a path, first subconsciously and later consciously, that got me to law school. Where on the very first day, I looked around and I was like, I've made a huge mistake. I don't belong here. I don't want to be here. But each one of us at some point in our lives was handed a definition by somebody else. And the mistake that we make is that, when we're given by a guidance counselor, for example, a list of things that make a good job good. How much money will I make? Where's the job located? How prestigious will it look on my career? What's the mission of the organization? Am I inspired by the leader? How many skills will I learn? What's the scale of impact? Things like that. Nobody ever says, take this list and prioritize it, because what makes a good job good isn't what makes a good job good for you until you prioritize this list. So some of us might want more vacation time. Some of us might want more money. Some of us might want more impact in the world. The very first job I took, I had a very menial administrative, get the coffee for the guy who got the coffee, for the guy who got the coffee, but I was in the CEO's office. And that was important to me because I got to see how all the deals were made. I got to see how the relationships were made. Everybody would define it differently. Other people might say, I'm not taking that job. I want to be the, senior vice president of whatever far off division. Everybody has a different rubric. So we have to take the list of what makes a good job good and reprioritize it so that what makes a good job good for each one of us individually.
Laura, listening to you, you're very practical and really down to earth and real world. And I took a quote out of your book. You say, expect good things to happen, and they will. Is that just being Pollyanna, or is it because of what you're saying? Because I think we take on a new personality when we truly expect something good to happen. The good salesperson who knows they're going to close 9 out of 10, or the lawyer who wins his or her cases.
Yeah, it's so funny that you asked that question because I am very practical. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business-minded person. And then I did all this research into the science of making your own luck and manifestation and all these expectations. And it turns out it's not bogus. It's not like this hippy dippy woo-woo stuff. There's actually science behind all of it. So we expect good things will happen. And we write on our vision board, that we're going to get a great deal on a flight to California. if we write that on our vision board, not just think it in our mind, but we write it down and we look at it every day, then we suddenly are, walking down the street and we see a billboard for sales on flights to California. Did we manifest the sale of the flight to California? Did we manifest the billboard? No, but our brains take on 11 million bits of data every single second. 11 million bits every single second. We can only process 50. So by putting the thing on your vision board, by expecting good things to happen and actively thinking about it, writing about it, looking at it, we train our brain to notice the things that we want. So when we expect that we're going to do well on a case, that we're going to make a sale, it's not that we're just hoping for the best. When we do that, we're telling ourselves we're the kind of person for whom things go well. So we might do a little extra homework on the client. We might do a little extra research. We might practice our closing statement a little bit more because the expectation of it. It's why lucky rabbit's feet, it's why lucky talisman work, because the person who has the lucky shorts or whatever, who's in the race, they know I'm going to wear my lucky shorts. Things are going to go well for me. So why wouldn't I just do this extra rep in the gym, right? Like it changes who we are and how we behave.
And you mentioned that that also helps us to overcome a lot of our fears. How does that work?
Yeah. So, when we expect things are going to go wrong, we don't try them. We don't surround ourselves with the right people. So in order to overcome our fears, we have to not just think what's the worst that can happen. We have to also be thinking about what's the best that can happen. There's a great story I tell in the book about a woman named Michelle Poehler who she was afraid of everything. And she decided to challenge herself for 100 days of doing the scariest things that she could possibly imagine. And, things like jumping out of a plane or starting a dance mob in Times Square, like just crazy stuff. And she, each time, instead of saying, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to die. I'll get embarrassed. I'll lose my job. I'll lose my apartment. She thought, what's the best thing that can happen? And she spent so much time thinking about the best thing that can happen that she began to get excited about the best thing that could happen. And when she did that, she started seeing more possibility. That possibility led her to change the mentors that she had and the research that she did and the effort that she put into things. And of course, great things happened.
Laura, what's the one last message you want to leave our audience as they read your book in their pursuit of the right job or right career for them?
My last message that I would leave people is that if you were listening to this and you're like, yeah, there is more inside of me, I could do more, I would say congratulations, because Wonderhell only presents itself to those who are worthy of it. So if you are seeing that you have more potential inside of you, you're not wrong. It's just up to you to go get it.
Great answer. Thank you so much for being with us today. Again, I want to remind our audience, the book is Wonderhell, Wonderhell, by our guest, Laura Gassner, Gassner, Otting, Otting. Laura, thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
To our audience, you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.